Chapter 4269. The first is more. After him, invincible masters such as Rabbit Buddha, Dark Demon descendants, etc. also moved. No one wants Prince Jinwu to take the lead. The donor, the poor monk, observes your sinfulness, and will soon be entangled in karma. Therefore, the poor monk advises you to return quickly to the shore and surrender the monument to the Buddha. Laughed. Boy, you have another option, is to cooperate with this seat, the two of us will kill together, and then this monument is divided equally, how about? The descendants of the Dark Devil laughed with a dark smile. But do NT even think about it, once Jian Wushuang really cooperates with him as he said, I am afraid that the first descendant of the Dark Devil's descendant will be his Jian Wushuang. The last invincible master to kill the moon was an expressionless face, with 5 slender fingers clearly holding the waist handle of the demon knife. He testified by killing that Zheng Jin slaughtered the 3-star domains, but this time he came to the 8 cities, just for the sake of killing and drinking blood. When Jian Wushuang heard the question, he slowly raised his head and looked at the people. Do you really want this monument? Jian Wushuang said lightly. Emperor Jinwu frowned and said, You're called Bloodsword, right? Bloodsword, I tell you, this prince hates others playing tricks in front of me. Now I will give you 3 rest times to make a choice. After the 3rd breath, whether or not you submit to me, the emperor will kill you. You understand? After saying this, Emperor Jinwu immediately stretched out a finger and said indifferently, a breath. 2nd breath. After waiting for him to count, Jian Wushuang laughed loudly, and his right palm patted the void, and the whole man rose into the sky. If you want to seal the monument, you rely on your strength. With that said, Jian Wushuang stepped on his feet, blasting away like a cannonball. Emperor Jinwu frowned immediately and said coldly, I don't know how to lift. The Emperor Jinwu also swept away, chasing towards the sword unparalleled. The two were in the air, and immediately formed 2 beams of light, flying forward and backward towards the distance. I am compassionate, but I also have the means of thunder. Why is the donor so handsome? The Rabbit Buddha sighed, but in his eyes was the red light flashing red blood, stepped down and turned into a horizontal thunder. After the Rabbit Buddha, the descendants of the Dark Demon and the Moon also turned into a blood river and a cold moon, and went after the sword unparalleled. At this moment, 4 invincible masters, while hunting down sword unparalleled. Jian Wushuang looked back at them for a moment, and there was a flash of murder in his eyes. These 4 invincible masters are not weak. Just one of them came out, far more than the Zhennan king, the 3 princes and others who were killed by Jian Wushuang in the Tail Ruins. Even today's Jian Wushuang, whether he can fight the 4 invincible masters without using the Yongyi trick, is unknown in his heart. The reason why he attracted these 4 people was that if he was forced to use only his whole cards, he could perform the Yongyi sword move without being noticed. There are too many people here, and it is inevitable that there will be people who can recognize the Tara sword code. Once the outside world knows that Jian Wushuang owns the Tara sword code, I am afraid that the entire universe will be a sensation for it. Blood sword, you can't escape. Emperor Jinwu held the trident on both sides, with an indifferent expression, and followed closely behind Jian Wushuang glanced back at him, didn't speak, just pulled a sneer from the corner of his mouth. 16th City Battlefield. Leader of the Cold Wind, what shall we do now? Leader Shanshan asked, looking at Jian Wushuang, Jinwu, and others who were blasting away. What can we do? The leader of the Cold Wind shook his head, his eyes flashing helplessly. The combat effectiveness of these people has far exceeded the scope they can compete with. The leader of the Cold Wind, but Bloodsword is, after all, a member of our camp. Is it just so watched that he was chased and killed by the Emperor Jinwu and others? The leader of Shanshan asked unwillingly again. The leader of the Cold Wind was silent for a moment, and then said gently, Shake the mountain, if you want to accompany the Bloodsword to die, then you go alone, this seat has to consider the lives of other people. Stuck. The leader of the Cold Wind continued, The Bloodsword is self-sustaining and self-cultivation is high strength. He did not act according to my instructions. Now he was chased and killed by himself. If he really falls, he can only blame himself. The leader of Shanshan heard the words, and there was a hint of hesitation on his face. However, it is such a moment of hesitation. Jian Wushuang and others have disappeared on the sky. The leader of Shaking Mountain had no choice but to sigh and stop speaking. At the same time, the 11th city. Overlord Shrine. A monster leaning on his waist, with a thin figure and a barbed back, holding a black and ebony box, walked step by step. Who's here? This is where the Overlord is, and the idlers quickly retreat. The two masters responsible for guarding the gate of the shrine suddenly frowned, and two spears crossed, blocking the way of the prisoner dragon. The prisoner lifted his hair down from his cheeks, narrowed his eyes and glanced at the four magnificent characters of Overlord Jingu, then turned his head to the two ultimate masters, and smiled and said, "Little guy, let me inquire about you." "Who?" The two ultimate masters, Wen Yang, frowned and asked. "Bloodsword, is it in this shrine?" The two ultimate masters immediately sneered and said, "It turned out to be Lord Bloodsword. Lord Bloodsword is our 7th commander, and you can't ask. I finally persuade you that you can quickly retreat now. I can when nothing happens, otherwise, blame me for waiting for the two spears to be polite." Prison Dragon smiled, looked at the two with an interest, and asked, "Oh? What a polite way." The two ultimate masters heard each other and looked at each other with a smirk on their faces, and the spear in their hands was raised high, chopping off towards the prisoner dragon. "Now you know." Watching the two spears from the chop, Prison Dragon chuckled. "Funny little guy." Huh. The two spears split on the prisoner's dragon without even seeing any white marks. The faces of the two ultimate masters suddenly changed, and before they changed their moves, two black chains had been violently shot from behind the prisoner dragon, instantly passing them through. "Since the two of you are not willing to say it, I will find one." Prison Dragon raised his head, glanced at the word Far King Shrine, and walked step by step. After a while, wow! Numerous armor guards blasted from all directions, holding spears, and looked at the prison dragon with a clear expression. "The Overlord has orders. Who dare to break into the Overlord Shrine, kill without amnesty." The leader of Emptiness stood in the first place with a cold expression. I saw that with a big wave of his hands, these armored guards rushed towards the prison dragon. The prisoner looked at the overwhelming armor guard and chuckled, "It's really courageous." Chapter 4270. Second more. Countless black chains blasted out from the back of the prison dragon, like a javelin, blasted towards this overwhelming armor guard. Suddenly, there was a miserable situation in the Overlord Shrine. Countless gods' blood permeated, and sounds of stern despair sounded one after another. The imaginary leader is the whole head being stabbed stiffly, thrown in the hands as a ball. In the Overlord Shrine, there was a sea of dead mountains and blood. The prisoner dragon carried his back, and walked towards the hall where the Overlord was in a relaxed manner. At the foot of the imprisoned dragon, the overwhelmingly prepared Overlord Shrine is like a victory in the court. No one can stop him for a moment. As if in no one's realm. After half a column of incense, the prisoner stepped into the Overlord Temple. This is where the Overlord is. At this moment, the Overlord Temple was quiet, and the 7 commanding seats were all empty. The Overlord sits on the dragon's seat, his eyes are closed slightly, his blood is boiling like a big sun. Da! 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 Hearing the footsteps, the Overlord's eyes suddenly opened, and a ray of God passed by his eyes. Didn't you stop it? The Overlord's brows frowned, and a look of discomfort flashed on his face. So many people can't stop one person? However, he didn't pay much attention, or he was one of the 9 giants. In the next 8 cities, only a few people can make him care. The prisoner dragon in front of him is obviously not in this rank. The prisoner dragon looked up at the Overlord and shrugged with a smile and shouted, "Big guy, your men are too rude. I only want to say a word, and they want to kill me. You said, how can you compensate me?" Compensation? Overlord Wenyang immediately laughed angrily. This man slaughtered his men, and even asked him for compensation. Also, he is the owner of the indestructible domineering body, one of the last 8 cities and 9 giants, who even called himself a big man. Go to hell. The Overlord sneered, stepped on his right foot, and the whole man suddenly flew up. His right fist condensed like a big sun, and he blasted towards the prisoner. This fist was just blasted out by the Overlord, but it was like the drums of the ancient heavens were slammed, and the space in the blast was shaken, cracking several cracks directly. This punch is enough to directly blast the stars. This punch shows the power of invincible domination. However, the prison dragon just stretched out his palm and grabbed the right fist of the Overlord. Huh! A muffled sound came, and the Overlord's fist hit the prisoner's palm firmly, and the huge power spread out, directly crushing the Overlord shrine. With two people as the center, the entire land is collapse. It was such a terrible punch that fell on the palm of the prisoner's outstretched hand, but he could not advance any further. What? The Overlord's expression changed immediately. You're rude. Prison Dragon shook his head, pinched his fingers, grabbed the Overlord's fist directly, and threw it fiercely. In that moment, the Overlord smashed out and smashed a long gully on the ground. In the sky, the Overlord jumped up, his face gloomy to the extreme. What the do you want to do? Bawang asked coldly. At the same time, his strength began to condense, and the skin of his body began to be covered with mysterious runes full of ancient breath. Do not destroy the bull body, he was triggered. I ask you, where is the blood sword? Prison Dragon twisted his neck and asked. Are you looking for a blood sword? The Overlord's eyes froze suddenly. 16th City Battlefield. A few light beams, chasing Jian Wushuang, quickly passing over 9 days. The Emperor wants to see, where can you escape? Emperor Jinwu said with an ancient indifference. Just after his words fell. The figure of Jian Wushuang sprinting forward suddenly stopped suddenly. Oh, don't run away. Emperor Jinwu laughed disdainfully, and his footsteps also stopped. Rabbit Buddha, Moon Killer, Dark Demon Descendants, etc., have changed shape, enclosing swords in a square shape. When did I say, I want to run away? Jian Wushuang stepped into the air, standing against his hands, his eyes glanced across the four faces. Blood sword, this emperor has given you a chance, but you don't cherish it, so now, don't blame this emperor's merciless. Emperor Jinwu said a little, then stepped on his feet, holding the trident on both sides, the first to kill the sword without a match. I saw him stabbing his halberds, and countless sacred fires poured along the tridents on both sides, turning into a dragon that swallowed the sun, and chanted the whirl. The Jinwu tribe was born among the sun stars, bathed under the sun fire all year round, and grew by sucking the sun fire, but it is the strongest force in the universe's fighting power. And the Emperor Jinwu is the royal family of the Jinwu family, the eldest son of the Emperor Jinwu the Great. From this we can see how horrible he is. If placed outside, it is enough to burn a galaxy into nothingness. My Buddha is compassionate, and the poor monk really does not want the ninjas to make evil. The Rabbit Buddha sighed, a picture of compassion, but the voodoo scepter in his hand did not hesitate, and smashed it towards the sword Wushuang. This smashing is quaint and heavy, the golden ring on the Zen stick makes a strange sound. Immediately, a sound of bulging Buddha sounded, as if between heaven and earth, there was a great Buddha who came to the world, lowered his giant hand, and punished evil. The descendants of the dark devil laughed wildly, tore his hands apart, and a blood river was drawn directly from the void by him, rolling towards the sword unparalleled. As for the handsome young demon's sword killing the moon, he said nothing and pulled out the demon's sword in his hand. A cold lull flickered across the face of the killing moon, and then, I saw a razor blade approaching to the extreme, like a torn knight of lightning, quickly collapsed into the void and slashed towards the sword unparalleled. Suddenly, the four invincible masters, and shot at the same time swordsman. Jian Wushuang's black hair flew up, facing a shock that only split from 4 directions. Although his eyes were turbulent, his heart was dignified to the extreme, and he was not relaxed at all. Chopper star. Jian Wushuang gave a cold drink, his eyes were sharp like a hawk, and he directly evoked more than 12,000 times the divine power, and 10 times the will power given by the law of the universe, turned into a silver sword rainbow of nearly 1,000 feet. Jian Wushuang turned over with his right hand, and Jian Hong swept away in his hand, welcoming the shock of these 4 invincible masters. Boom tilde. However, in the usual week, the starstruck Jian Hong, who was not disadvantaged in the face of the 4 people's joint blows, even only persisted for a few breaths, and then instantly defeated. But A few breaths is enough. Taking advantage of this gap, Jian Wushuang stepped on his right foot and killed the descendants of the Dark Demon. These 4 invincible dominate, the Emperor Jinwu is the strongest, and the descendants of the Dark Devil itself are weak against them, and they were seriously injured before, which is the best to kill. Burning power. Jian Wushuang did not hesitate to directly cast the dragon extermination technique, his strength sword. In a flash of his figure, he appeared directly in front of the descendants of the Dark Lord. Okay. And when the descendants of the Dark Demon stunned for a while, the Wu-crying Excalibur with no hands in the sword had been severely cut at him. The first one to die is you. Chapter 4271. The first is more. After seeing this menacing sword, the descendants of the Dark Devil's face suddenly changed slightly. He didn't expect that Jian Wushuang's first goal would be him. Call out. No wait for the descendants of the Dark Devil to come at all. The speed of Jian Wushuang was extremely fast, and the sharp Zhenguang directly splitting the entire Dark Demon descendant in half. But weirdly, he didn't wait for Jian Wushuang's sword to break out, shatter the body of the descendants of the Dark Devil, and his body automatically decomposed into a pool of blood. The next moment, the pool of blood backed away, and the figure of the Dark Demon descended again. Blood sword, it. The descendants of the Dark Devil looked dull, grabbed with his right hand, and a spear condensed in his hand. At the same time, a flash of anger flashed through his heart. If it weren't for their Dark Demon tribe, they were bred from the blood of the Blood River, and could be dispersed into blood water at any time. I'm afraid that the sword of Sword Wushuang just made him overturn in the gutter. However, although the sword of the Sword Wushuang did not kill him, he also used this Blood River mystic skill, and it was also costless. At this time, Emperor Jinwu and others have been killed again. I saw the Emperor Jinwu ignited a flame, and the Jinwu mark on the eyebrows became more and more enchanting. He held the trident on both sides, like an ancient of war, stepping forward. Blood sword, give up the unnecessary struggle, it is your glory to die under the prince, said Jinwu, coldly. Jian was eyes fixed. First he cut 3 swords in succession, forcing the descendants of the dark monster who was about to move away, then turned abruptly, and looked at the shock that struck him, sneering, "You can die in me, your sword is your glory." The words fell to the ground. The sword Wushuang Wu weeping sword pointed directly at the Emperor Jinwu, and did not retreat to fight back. Stubbornness. There was a coldness on Emperor Jinwu's face, and the golden fire on both sides of the trident became more and more turbulent. Jinwu Shunhua is one of the top 3 peerless gods in the universe. It is powerful enough to burn the sky. Burning the sky. Emperor Jinwu spoke, and instantly, his trident on both sides completely turned into a fire dragon. Open the sky. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath, and all the divine power erupted, prompting Kaitian Yijian to slash in front of the Emperor Jinwu. Boom. Under the attack of the two, I saw countless Jin Wushan fire exploded, landed in the void, and made a sound of burning. How could you force this prince back? Emperor Jinwu's eyes flickered, and he stepped back half a step, glanced down at the slightly numb palm, and sighed with admiration. Blood sword, just hit this one. In the next 8 cities, you will have a place. Unfortunately, you should never think about swallowing up the monument alone. Although the words of admiration are in his mouth, the murder between the eyebrows is getting more and more cold. This son must die today. Otherwise, once you let this son escape, if you want to kill him again in the future, I am afraid it will be difficult. Jian Wushuang heard the words. There was no time to talk back, but his eyes turned and looked coldly towards the smashing moon. I saw Zaiyu slanting the handle of the demon's sword, fast as a phantom, and when he stepped on it, a second killing moon appeared in the void not far from him. Immediately, the 3rd, 4th, 5th. This is the afterimage of the killing moon because it is too fast. Until the killing moon appeared in front of the sword without 2 sides, when the demon knife split in the hand, the first afterimage of the killing moon was dissipated. So fast. Jian Wushuang's eyes narrowed. This person's speed was much faster than the snake Lang Jun that day. Wow. When the moon was slashed with a knife, Jian Wushuang was preparing to lift the sword to resist it. I saw that the moon's right hand was turned over, but it was changed to a slash in an instant, and the demon sword passed directly across the sword. Laugh. Immediately, a deep knife mark appeared on the sword's body. Jian Wushuang glanced down at the knife marks on the god's body. Countless divine powers permeated, the god's body was restored, and his face was turbulent. Although this killing moon didn't say anything from beginning to end, if it comes to strength, I am afraid that it is not worse than Emperor Jinwu, and this person's understanding of the knife path has also reached the 4th level of the universe knife path. Sure enough, no one who can reach the invincible dominance will be a simple character. Jian Wushuang whispered to himself, and in his eyes the war intent rose sharply by 3 inches, and he whispered, "Come again." Suddenly, Jian Wushuang exhibited the swift kendo, killing towards the moon. If you only talk about speed, even if you add Heiate kendo, Jian Wushuang is not as good as him, but he has other means. Dragon's mystery skill, burning power, boom. The mighty divine power in Jian Wushuang's body that had been calmed down at this moment began to burn wildly again. Under the burning of divine power, his strength suddenly soared. "Blood sword, you're exciting me." Before Ye changed his calmness, he laughed loudly, holding the sword towards the sword without a match. Soaring. I saw that the speed of both of them was extremely fast, and they instantly fought against each other in the empty space. Wu Chong's Excalibur and the monster knife in the hand of the moon continued to collide. With each collision, a series of sparks could be pulled up, and a shocking sound. The two people's understanding of their respective kendo and deodo is one level, but Jian Wushuang's use of the laws of the universe and the total amount of divine power are much stronger than this moon. Soon, the moon fell into the downwind. Emperor Jinwu, Rabbit Buddha, and others looked at this scene, their faces became dignified. The descendants of the Dark Lord said lightly, "Jinwu, Rabbit Buddha, this blood sword has reached the level of kendo understanding. If you keep your hands and let him continue fighting, I am sure that we will be defeated one by one." Hearing this, both Emperor Jinwu and Rabbit Buddha frowned, but also knew that what the descendants of the Dark Devil said was true. At this moment, it is the most important thing to get the Fengshan monument. There is no need to follow the sword without twining bucket. Lest night-long dreams, let's join forces to kill this person first. Emperor Jinwu said, equal to the final word, announced the death penalty of Jian Wushuang. Talented magical powers, Jinwu Tun Ri. The voice fell, and behind him, a huge Jinwu virtual reality suddenly appeared. This Jinwu is as high as thousands of feet in the sun, bathed in the sun, the wings are condensed by flames, and a scream of clear chanting is heard, and the world is instantly shaken. Seeing this, the descendants of the Dark Lord also said, "Talented, abyss." Wow! A huge blood river appeared around the descendants of the Dark Demon. This blood river seemed to be real and constantly flowing, and it even made a roaring and exciting sound. "I am compassionate." The rabbit and the Buddha folded their hands together and said each word. Rumble. The world began to shake, and numerous clouds were torn. First, an inch of golden light was emitted through the dark clouds. Subsequently, this golden light is more and more, and more. The next moment, the entire sky became dazzling, and numerous Buddha lights shone on the earth. A giant golden Buddha emerged, standing in the void. Chapter 4272. Second more. This golden Buddha is full of golden light, and the treasure is solemn, full of sacred inviolability. It's just weird that the head of this golden Buddha is a rabbit head with red eyes. In this sacred atmosphere, there is another gloom. Go with. The three waved their hands, and for a while, 3 blows to destroy the world, and at the same time blasted towards Jian Wushuang. First, the one that swallowed the sun, and under the wings of a pair of wings, countless flames fell from the wings like molten plasma, opened their mouths, and bite at the sword Wushuang. Immediately after that was the blood river, like the rising tide of the river, carrying a roaring roar, and rushing towards the sword unparalleled. In the end, it was the giant Buddha who stretched out 5 fingers and pressed them towards the sword unparalleled. Each of these 5 fingers is as tall as a mountain. Once pressed, they suddenly cover the sky, and a burst of sound in the void creates a sound of various sound barrier bursts. Jian Wushuang and Zhu Yu watched the 3 invincible masters joint hit, and could not help but stop the action on their hands. The moon killing by the sword unparalleled only by parry was slightly slowed, and he shook his head and said, "Blood sword, your understanding of kendo is no less than my understanding of kendo, but unfortunately, the situation does not allow me to fighting against you." After that, Yeye stepped back, saying one word at a time, "Mystery, step on God." Boom. This sword is cut out, as if the world is split, and the two worlds of yin and yang are separated, and the sword air is in full swing. The four invincible masters no longer keep their hands, while performing mysterious magic. Looking at the four annihilation blows that carried the might of heaven and earth, Zhen Wushuang looked dignified and took a deep breath. God, now. A force from the deepest part of the soul that belongs to the perfect level of life emerges. Suddenly, Zhen Wushuang sounded a crackling sound like fried beans. Immediately after, I saw Zhen Wushuang's body skyrocketing inch by inch. 1 foot, 10 feet, 100 feet, 1,000 feet. 10,000 miles, 3,000 miles, 6,000 miles. In a blink of an eye, the sword warriors turned into a world-strength giant, holding the sun and the moon to pick the stars, and stepping on the earth and mountains and the sea. He was surrounded by Xianhui, making his appearance unclear, just like the Chaos Immortal King came to life, and a horrible power that could not use any words spread out from him. In the presence of this Chaos Fairy King, Emperor Jinwu and others are as tiny as ants. Even the former Golden Buddha who sits sideways in the void, like a young boy, is not as high as his knees. Town. A dull voice came from Zhen Wushuang's mouth. The next moment, I saw that the sword was double action. He first stretched out his palm and took 5 fingers towards the Golden Buddha, then spread out the other hand, and pinched the Jinwa's hand like a little chicken in his hand, raised his most feet, and stepped on the blood river to the descendants of the dark demon, and the shocking sword of the moon. Sword unparalleled body, suppressed the 4 invincible masters at the same time. Can't use any words to describe this collision. In this collision, the world seems to be in the end of the disaster. The mountains and rivers are capsized, the world is turned upside down, and the sky is set off. A huge shock wave spread, filling up all nearby hills. Immediately, a blast exploded, as if thousands of thunders blew at the same time. What? The Emperor Jinwa's pupils shrank, and the face, which was cold from the beginning to the end, did not have any emotions. For the first time, an incredible color surged. The Rabbit Buddha and the Moon Killing were not much better, and shocked on his face. As for the weakest descendants of the Dark Devil, they were directly shaken by the impact of Qilong, and almost fell from the air. Is this the power of special life? The 4 looked at each other, their eyes were shocked. Not only these 4 people, but even the distant mountain leader and other people, all sensed this amazing explosive power. Who is so horrible? Shaking Mountain Commander stunned. The Cold Wind Commander took a deep breath, and his eyes scorched back. No matter what the horror might be, the battle between Bloodsword and Emperor Jinwu must be extremely fierce. The turbulent turbulence of the sky gradually dissipated, and I saw Zhen Wushuang, who was bombarded by 4 shocking magical mysteries. The body was covered with thousands of cracks, and the 4 magical mysteries had disappeared. Whirring. A gust of wind blew through. Zhen Wushuang raised his head, and looked coldly at the 4 Emperor Jinwu. Now, it's me. He held a handful of hands, and Wu Weapon's Excalibur hovered in front of his chest, turning into a silver sword rainbow of nearly 1,000 feet. Chopper Star. Immediately, this nearly thousands of silver Zhenhong locked on the descendants of the Dark Devil, and quickly cut off at him. When the descendants of the Dark Devil saw this, they almost spit out the old blood and snarled, "Bloodsword. Why don't you kill others, just hold me back?" Zhen Wushuang's expression was indifferent and he could not answer. He can feel that the divine power required to support the divine body is simply too horrible. Even if he is a special level of perfect life, more than 13,000 times the divine power, under this consumption, it is also nearing the bottom. I am afraid that at most only I can persist in the 10 breath time. Therefore, I must take advantage of my current peak period to kill one of the 4 invincible masters in the 10 breath time. The descendants of the Dark Lord are obviously the best choice. The first breath, the silver Qian Zhong Zhenhong condense. The second breath, the silver sword rainbow, was cut off towards the descendants of the Dark Demon. Mystery, Blood Lotus. The descendants of the Dark Devil looked at the silver sword Hong that had been cut off, and roared. I saw his hands swiftly knowing his way, and in the void in front of him, a lotus flower suddenly appeared. This blossoming red lotus intersects each other, each one sucking the power of heaven and earth and growing up sharply. In just 3 breaths, this blossoming lotus becomes intertwined to form a blood-red lotus platform, spinning and flying towards the silver sword rainbow. Jinwu, Rabbit Buddha, killing the moon, if I am dead, can you stop him? The descendants of the dark devil turned around and drank. The Emperor Jinwu, Rabbit Buddha, and Yeye heard expressions that were cloudy and uncertain, and knew the intention of Jian Wushuang in their hearts. Taking a deep breath, Emperor Jinwu drank lowly. Yes, this blood sword has become a climate, and we must gather the strength of the 4 of us in order to kill him. Everyone, don't keep your hand, stop this sword. I saw that Emperor Jinwu took the lead in turning his right hand first, and a net woven from the wings of Jinwu flew out to protect the descendants of the dark devil. This Jinwu feather was obviously very precious, even the Emperor Jinwu's eyes flashed a tinge of pain. The Rabbit Buddha was hesitant in his expression, and opened his mouth to spit out a colorful relic, and slammed into the silver sword rainbow of sword unparalleled. It's too difficult for a poor monk. He shook his head and sighed. Doubting the moon did not hesitate, pulled the knife out of the sheath again, and cut out a shocking sword. Chapter 4273. The first is more. The silver sword rainbow, nearly thousands of feet, was like a river pouring from top to bottom, fiercely splitting towards the descendants of the dark devil. This sword rainbow was so vast that it was like the flood of a dike. They were all swallowed up, even the sky and clouds over 9 days were smashed by 500 swords by the sword Wushuang, forming a narrow white line. Under this silver sword rainbow, the scarlet lotus terrace was the first to be unable to support it. The blossoming lotus leaves began to break, and the lotus terrace continued to crack open. With a loud noise, the scarlet lotus terrace burst into pieces. So scary Jian Hong. If the descendants of the dark devil were slammed, his chest slumped sharply, and a mouthful of blood spit out of his mouth. At this point, the distant sword Wushuang shot to cut out the star sword Jian Hong. 6 breath time has passed. Immediately afterwards, I saw the colorful relic spewing out of the rabbit's mouth. The colorful relic revolved continuously, blocking the silver sword rainbow that was pressed down like the flood of the dike. Can't help, a burst of unpleasant clapping and shattering sounds, and finally, in a muffled sound of, it is torn apart. The body shape of the Rabbit Buddha was shocked, counted backwards, and there was a tinge of pain in his eyes. This colorful relic was born after exhausting countless hours of his mental energy. As long as he bred a few more chaos periods, it would be very likely to become the ultimate rule of treasure, but now, it can be described as a loss. Only the shocking swordman turned into a demon's sword in the moon-killing hand, cut into the silver sword rainbow stiffly, and the swordman entered into the tens of meters, but it was just like splitting on the cowhide. It gets harder to go inside, and finally, under the horrible sword intention of the silver sword rainbow, the blade is completely shattered. But the moon was shot backwards and smashed into a mountain far away. The silver sword rainbow, after breaking through all the obstacles, finally split on the skull of the descendants of the dark devil. The wing Luo Luo, which was given to him by Emperor Jinwu, quickly flew out, enclosing the silver sword rainbow. However, now the sword-struck sword rainbow blessed by various forces such as Jian Wushuang's whole body power, coupled with the willpower of the universe, the burning of divine power, the origin of the 4th heavy kendo, and so on, are really terrifying. And then they are caught by wings after consuming most of the sword energy. This feather net woven from the wings of the Emperor Jinwu also declared defeat, and it burst into pieces after a wailing sound. In the end, the silver sword rainbow was unstoppable, and in the roar of the dreaded descendants of the dark devil, he cut the whole person in half like a knife-cut tofu. This time, the descendants of the dark devil are not so lucky. At all, he did not wait for him to perform the secret technique of hemorrhage river. He was completely shattered by the sharp sword and turned into countless powder. At this point, 10 interest times have passed. The descendants of the Dark Lord, one of the 4 invincible masters, have fallen. The Emperor Jinwu, the Rabbit Buddha and the Moon Killer all turned pale. One of the 4's joint efforts was broken by Jian Wushuang's sword. The The three Emperor Jinwu took a sigh of coolness, and they were convinced that Jian Wushuang is definitely a giant-level combat power. You know, all four of them are the most powerful of the invincible masters. In terms of combat effectiveness, they are far more powerful than the three princes and other people encountered in the ruins of Tai Luo at the beginning. The Emperor Jinwu is even more famous. Be the first person under the 9 giants. The 4 of them joined forces. I'm afraid that even the giants will retreat from 3 Point. Where exactly did this person emerge from? The 3 looked at each other with shock in their hearts. Above the sky, the breath on Jian Wushuang's body quickly began to fall, the body gradually shrank, and finally returned to its normal shape. Feeling the severe pain from the bones of the whole body, Jian Wushuang could not help but grin. The price of using the body was still too great. However, it is gratifying that compared to the last use of the body, it is still much better. Jian Wushuang grabbed his right hand and grabbed dozens of superb magic drugs directly from the Chenkuan ring and swallowed them, regardless of how expensive these magic drugs were. When he thought of them, he wiped them out. Turn it into the purest divine power and replenish consumption. Seeing this, the Emperor Jinwu took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, "You guys, this shot is so expensive in turn, and the cost of wanting to come is so great. I won't let anyone keep it and kill him together." The Rabbit Buddha and the Moon Slay nodded slightly. Suddenly, 3 terrifying killings erupted, turned into turbulent winds, and shattered the sky. Jian Wushuang's expression was still indifferent, but in his eyes, the surging warfare became more and more turbulent. This startling battle has begun again. Boom! With a bang, the 3 Emperor Jinwu, Yeye, and Rabbit Buddha stepped in the void, and once again slew towards the sword unparalleled. The trident and 2-faced halberd in the hand of Emperor Jinwu disappeared, his arms turned into a pair of flaming flame wings, his eyes were replaced by the divine fire, and only when his wings were raised, he appeared in the sky above the sword. Roar! Emperor Jinwu opened his mouth and moaned, and immediately gave out a clear cry that shocked the world for 9 days. Immediately, he saw a fireball spit out of his mouth. This fireball was only the size of a fist at first, but after vomiting from the mouth of Emperor Jinwu, it rose up against the wind. When it was pressed down towards Jian Wushuang, the fireball had turned into a golden sun. This round of scorching sun is vast and boundless, not to mention the burning flames inside, even the hot temperature radiated from it. The earth of the 16th city is roasted and cracked directly. The Rabbit Buddha closed his eyes, and the blood-stained urn began to shatter. The next moment, I saw that he became a 1,000-handed evil Buddha. Countless arms extended from various places in his body. Each hand held different magic weapons, including a bowl, a scripture, a Zen stick, a relic, and so on. There was a wicked smile in the corner of his mouth, and then his lips were closed up and down, and he began to chant strange Buddhist scriptures. Under this Buddhist scripture, all the magic weapons held in his thousands of arms rose into the air, and then continually condensed to form a * Buddhist seal, pressing against the sword. The moon was closing his eyes, and a gust of wind rolled up around him. Mystery, kill God. His lips lightened, and he slowly spit out the 5-word. The next moment, he stepped forward in a footstep and cut it out with a slash. This knife was cut out in the same round of half a month, full of antelope hanging horns, no trace of the trend, but his incarnation of the knife path, all incarnation. After this was cut out, the sky was torn directly and the world was destroyed. A fireball like the sun, the *-shaped Buddha seal covering the sky, tearing the horrible swordman of the sky. The 3 forces, like the 3 hanging Tianhe, smashed down with unparalleled power. Chapter 4274. Second more. In the face of these 3 gangs of surging Ji Shi Pei Shui, Jian Wushuang's solemn expression, but gradually restored peace. He let go of Wu Weapon's sword, spreading his hands as if embracing this world, and raised his head with a big breath. The next moment, he bowed his head sharply, and looked at them all. Taro sword code, first style, forever night. Alas! After the words fell, time and space seemed to stagnate. There were no earth-shattering explosions, and no eclipse that caused the world to eclipse. It was as if a tiny stone had been dropped in a calm lake, and ripples rippled around. Wu Xing's exquisite sword suspended in front of him quietly began to disappear silently from the point of the sword to the hilt of the sword. What the is blood sword doing? What does he want? Both the Emperor Jinwu and the Rabbit Buddha frowned tightly, and they could feel that a strange power began to erode towards them. This weird force was like a pair of large invisible hands hidden in the darkness, tremblingly extended from behind them, and then they gripped their necks. Cold, suffocating, dark, dull, stiff. All kinds of negative emotions poured out. The world began to fade quickly, the light in the sky gradually disappeared, everything was so silent, and let it go. Unconsciously, the world in their eyes has become colorless, and the world is left only with a thick haze of gray. And this gray is still deepening, as if to draw them into the eternal dark abyss. Feeling this power, both Emperor Jinwu and Rabbit Buddha had a strong sense of uneasiness in their hearts. Obviously there is no danger, but the instinct of instinct makes them hate everything in front of them and wants to escape. Of the three, only Yeye seemed to know something, and the whole person froze, watching the scene blankly, his lips constantly becoming trembling and terrified. This power is the recorded Tara sword code. Suddenly, his face became pale, and the whole person was teetering, almost falling from the air. How can this be happening? Isn't it too Luo Jianjian? Has it been lost for a long time? Why did it appear in his hand? Juyue said to himself in chaos, his body shaking violently. Emperor Jinwu noticed this and asked with a frown, "What's wrong with you, Moon?" Hearing this questioning, Yeye just slammed Ji Ling soberly, shouting, "Run away." The Emperor Jinwu and the Rabbit Buddha heard the words, and they were all confused. They couldn't figure out what the ghost was doing. However, due to their inherent caution, they subconsciously fled first. Unfortunately, it's all over. When Yongye started, the space where the three of them belonged is no longer in the ancient road of the starry sky, but belongs to the eternal dark territory opened by Yongye. Jian Wushuang looked at this scene, his expression was not happy or sad, his face was not shocked, and he said softly, "Deprive it, night." A trace of dark mist spread from the soles of Jianhua's feet, and then slowly climbed towards the three Emperor Jinwu, finally intertwined to form a large black ball, wrapping the three in this black circle. Among the balls, to the outsider, this black sphere seems to be a sphere that can be broken with a poke, but to the three Emperor Jinwu, it is a boundless and dark country. This is not the 9 calamities one-minded kingdom of God, but the one sword that belongs to the sword unparalleled. I saw that in this dark space, the Emperor Jinwu, Rabbit Buddha, and Yeye all changed their faces. They could feel that in this eternal darkness, there was an invisible force in the midst of the darkness, which was depriving them. Power and vitality. The joint strike they had bombarded before was also wrapped in this dark country. In this dark country, this was originally enough to destroy the planet and smash the galaxy, but it absorbed the power as if it were stripped and cocooned. The original horrible power began to fall at a rate visible to the naked eye. Weak. In just a few breaths of time, these 3 powers disappeared completely. Alas! The Slayer Moonshaven Demon's sword and the hundreds of treasures of the Rabbit and Buddha all disappeared, turned into mortals, and fell into the endless darkness. How can it be? The Emperor Jinwu and Rabbit Buddha shrank their pupils, and for the first time they were shocked. What kind of power is that? But that is the source of the mysterious fire of the Emperor. Even the mysterious cold water has been extinguished. Why is this so? The Emperor Jinwu did not dare to speak. The Rabbit Buddha was also trembling in the same way. These rules are treasures that he collected from countless years, and each one has his painstaking effort. At this moment, hundreds of thousands of rule treasures were damaged, and he couldn't help snarling again, "Blood sword, the poor monk will kill you." Among the 3, there was a bitter smile on the face of Juyue, and he shook his head helplessly, and there was no surprise on his face. From the moment he recognized the move, he knew that the ending was doomed. "Break it for me." Emperor Jinwu roared and smashed several fires. However, everything was useless. As soon as the fire broke out, it was absorbed by the surrounding void. The Emperor Jinwu discovered a more terrifying fact, that is, he found that in this kingdom of eternal night, his unstoppable power that relies on the sky and began to dissipate. Ultimate. 5th level. 4th level. Master of Rules. In a short moment, Emperor Jinwu was dominated by an invincible universe and incomparable combat power, and fell to earth. His handsome face began to sag and wrinkle. One night, deprive everything. Not only deprived of divine power, but also deprived Shoyuan. Between the moments, Emperor Jinwu seemed to have experienced mortal life, illness, death, from being a godrich man, the ultimate master of Feng-Fengyun, to a mortal old man. In the end, the Emperor Jinwu couldn't even support the transformation form, and turned into a 3-legged Jinwu that was exhausted. At the same time, under this force, Yeye and Rabbit Buddha have become 2 dry corpses. Emperor Jinwu was despairing. At the last moment of his death, he reached out his hand tremblingly, crushed a token hanging around his waist, and raised his head hard. "Father, help me!" Boom! An extremely ancient and majestic Jinwu screamed through the floods of the universe. Next moment, Jian Wushuang felt an incomparably hot and horrendous horror that could not be described in words. With Emperor Jinwu as the center, it exploded. This power far surpassed Jian Wushuang's cognition. It was the supreme power that he did everything and could not resist at all. Under this mighty power, the sword's unparalleled Yongye kingdom was directly torn. Chapter 4275. The first is more. Puff. Under this indescribable terror, Jian Wushuang retreated wildly, his arms exploded. The eternal dark kingdom formed by the sword of eternal night is shattered even more. What kind of power is this? Jian Wushuang looked frantically. I saw Emperor Jinwu's eyes closed tightly, his breath was fading to the extreme, and the whole man was dying, as if he were going to fall at any time. However, behind him, countless flames burst out. The flame condensed behind him, slowly turned into a human figure, and then stretched out his hands to hold the Emperor Jinwu. This flame figure can't see the appearance, but it has a strong enough to make the world disappointed, and the coercion of the surrender of the people spread. This coercion was extremely horrible. Under the coercion, Jian Wushuang could not help but tear and collapse. This coercion, after crossing the sword unparalleled, swept away in all directions. Wherever the coercion passed, the void was roaring. What power! Extreme breath. Under this coercion, the whole city was shaken. Countless people looked horrified and rushed to see here. Some of these eyes are from the 9 giants. However, the 9 giants that have always been in the post-8 cities, after seeing this flame figure, put away the meaning of unscrupulous look, respectfully and superbly. Who dares hurt me? This flame figure raised his head and slowly looked at Jian Wushuang. A low voice with majesty so that it could not tolerate any resistance came from his mouth. As if, he is the of heaven who controls the life and death of the universe, holding the right to life and death. In the eyes of this flame figure, there are 2 blazing fires. These 2 blazing fires are like 2 rounds of sun inlaid in them. They cannot be seen directly. Under this gaze, the void seems to be unable to persist. In order to collapse, Jian Wushuang was trembling all over, as if the body would burst in the next moment. Jinwu, Great Emperor. Jian Wushuang trembled and his pupils shrank. No need to guess, Jian Wushuang also recognized it. This flame figure is the Jinwu Emperor in the universe. Emperor Jinwu, who became famous in the 500 Chaos prehistoric era, is one of the oldest top supremes in the universe. He is a top 10 in the universe and has a reputation for overwhelming the heavens. One word is definitely one of the most terrifying names in the universe. Even the Supreme of Blood and Supreme of the Axe, in the presence of Emperor Jinwu, can only be called juniors, and must meet the ancestors after meeting. Is it you that hurt my son? Emperor Jinwu's eyes condensed on Jian Wushuang's face. Although the words spoken were interrogative sentences, the overbearing tone was full of unquestionable meaning. Jian Wushuang was condensed by Emperor Jinwu's eyes, and suddenly felt that his eyes were like the most terrifying fire, and he wanted to burn him through. Jian Wushuang gritted his teeth and did not answer. He is not stupid and reckless, and although he is now very humiliated, he also knows that at this moment, instead of arguing about snoring, it is better to say nothing and use silence to show his attitude. After all, the world is the strongest. No one will talk to an ant who can run to death with a single finger and talk about it. At the moment, the sword unparalleled, in front of Emperor Jinwu, is like an ant who can be killed by a finger. Emperor Jinwu narrowed his eyes, looked up at the sky, and said indifferently, "Little man, this time the deity looks at that adult's face and doesn't care about you, but next time, you won't be so lucky." After that, the flame figure of Emperor Jinwu, and the Emperor Jinwu with his eyes closed, gradually turned into fine sand from his feet, and the last breeze passed, and the two figures disappeared into the 8 cities behind the ancient sky. Until 9 days ago, only the fierce howling wind remained. After a long time, Jian Wushuang's tense heart completely relaxed and exhaled a long breath. Is this the ultimate horror in the universe? Jian Wushuang smiled bitterly. Originally, he thought that although the Supreme was terrifying, it was not so terrifying, such as the Black Eagle Supreme of the Universe Temple he met before, the White Floating Supreme of the Taishu Temple, etc. Although he was far from the opponent, but not so much as it is now, just a look is enough to make him tremble. This is the first time he has faced the Supreme in the universe. The sense of oppression and suffocation that came from the depths of his soul has made him look up at the endless sky when he was young. That feeling, I was so small. Moreover, the flame figure just now is not the real Jinwu Emperor, it is just a mark of the divine power left by the Emperor Jinwu. How terrible is the true King Jinwu? Jian Wushuang did not dare to think further. At this moment, in the solar star field, which is extremely far away from the depths of the universe. This is the habitat of the Panyu of the Jinwu tribe. 9 gigantic fireballs are arranged in the shape of 9 stars in a row, forming an aperture, forming a star-shaped moon. Among the 9 fireballs, a round is hundreds of times larger than the 9 fireballs. This sun is so large that it can't be described in words. The usual stars are so small as dust in front of the sun. The flares emitted by them will illuminate dozens of star fields all around the sky grunt. On the sun in the center, there are countless hot melts flowing and tumbling, and huge bubbles are emitted, making a terrible burning sound. Whenever the bubbles burst, they are splashed with countless fire. And this magic fire, just a random cluster, can kill the ultimate master. Father, what's wrong with him? At this moment, a 3-foot-long Jinwu, flying from one of the 9 small suns, fluttered to the huge sun in the center and asked respectfully, "I don't care about you, don't ask, don't ask." A deep and majestic voice came from the depths of the central sun. The 3-footed Jinwu heard a word, and immediately trembled, daring to ask more, and quickly resigned. Deep in the sun, in the endless melt, a pair of huge scarlet eyes opened suddenly. This ancient Shinkong road is somewhat interesting. Well, the breath I felt before, the little guy who was exiled by the dragons, seems to have gone too. Interesting. With a small laugh, the huge scarlet eyes closed slowly. Emperor Jinwu fell into a long sleep again. With his eyes closed, the Emperor Jinwu, who had fallen into a coma, rose slowly from the depths of the melt. His slack and wrinkled skin, nourished by this melt, began to repair gradually, and the dissipated divine power also recovered at an amazing speed. Next moment, Emperor Jinwu's eyes opened sharply, and he stepped heavily, rising from the molten sky. "Bloodsword, how dare you kill this prince? This prince will kill you." A fierce roar suddenly exploded in the solar star field. Chapter 4276. Second more. Shinkong Ancient Road, in the 16th city. Jian Wushuang sat cross-legged on the void, quietly restoring the power and repairing the body. Some of the ultimate masters who came before heard the news, one after another, and looked at Jian Wushuang with complex eyes. Although they have not witnessed the battle between Jian Wushuang and the 4 invincible masters such as King Jinwu, they have been paying attention to them secretly. They thought that the 4 invincible masters shot, even if the giants came in person, they could not escape, but did not expect that Jian Wushuang could fight back and reverse the victory. Use your own strength to turn the tide and kill the 4 invincible masters. What a horrible combat power! Leaders of Shaking the Mountain and leader of the Cold Wind also watched Jian Wushuang from afar. Their eyes were no longer shock and horror, but deep awe. Others only know that Jian Wushuang's combat power is unparalleled in the world, with one enemy and 4, but they don't know that Jian Wushuang is now dominated by the 5th rank. Use the power of the 5th level to dominate the 4 invincible masters. These deeds have been unheard of since ancient times, and I am afraid that there will be no ancients before, and no one will come later. There is great terror in this person. The leader of Shaoshan muttered to himself. There are many more staring at Jian Wushuang. After this battle, the blood sword will seal the war in one battle and make the universe famous. Since then, the pattern of the 8 cities behind the ancient starry sky will be changed by the blood sword alone, and he will become the 10th giant to be promoted to the latter 8 city. Universal. The blood sword seals the gods. Blood sword, ascend to the throne of the ancient road giant. Countless people secretly marveled. Just as the crowd was boiling, suddenly, a very dissonant low laughter sounded from the outermost part of the crowd. Well, it's so lively. Immediately, I saw a weird man with a waist on his back, barbs on his back, and a sandalwood box in his arms. This person is a prisoner. Where's the man? This man walked rampantly and was rude. Where's the kid? Go away. An almost invincible ultimate dominates his eyes with a frown, and his face flashes with dissatisfaction. He stretches out his hand and grabs at the prison dragon, trying to pull him to the back. He hasn't waited for his hand to touch the prison dragon. Get away. The prisoner took a photo with the palm of his hand, directly slapped the ultimate master of near invincible level, slapped to fly 1,000 feet away, and fell directly from the air, like a cannonball, smashed into the emperor fiercely, raising the sky and dust. Everyone looked at this scene, and suddenly their throats rolled and they swallowed, and they did not dare to squeak anymore. In this way, the prison dragon stepped out of the crowd step by step, raised his head to look at the sword unparalleled sitting cross-legged on the void. He first took out a black mirror from his waist and looked at it as if verifying his identity. He immediately looked up at Jian Wushuang, and giggled, "Blood sword, finally found you." Jian Wushuang heard the words, his slightly closed eyes slowly opened, and frowned, "You have something to do with me." The prisoner smiled strangely, and whispered, "Nothing, I just want to find something for you." "Let me borrow something?" Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows and said lightly, "What to borrow?" Prison dragon didn't rush to reply, but struck the void with his right foot, and the whole man rose into the sky, stretched out his hand and patted the sword. He smiled lowly, "Let's use the item on your head, boom." The prisoner's big hand has not been photographed yet. The barbs growing behind him have turned into countless black chains, taking the lead in violently blasting towards Jian Wushuang. These barbs are extremely fast, almost like countless artillery shells, pulling up a fierce sound boom in the air. Okay. Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows. Although he didn't know who the man was and why he suddenly shot at him, the subconscious combat experience instantly made him step back, and his appearance flashed behind him. 100 feet. It's fast. The prisoner whispered a laugh, and instantly turned into a dark shadow, and swept towards the sword unparalleled again. The dense black chains hovered over his back, and kept bombarding towards the sword unparalleled. Jian Wushuang's eyebrows froze. Wu Wei's divine sword appeared in his hand for a moment, and moved between them, quickly swinging his sword towards the prisoner dragon. Dang dang dang. Jian Wushuang slammed thousands of swords on this black chain instantly, splashing a long string of sparks. Hey! Sword Wushuang receded back, his legs pulled out 2 long white marks in the air. What a terrifying power! Jian Wushuang's pupils couldn't help shrinking, looking down, and Huku was numb for a while. This is nothing. The most important thing is that before the sword warriors and the 4 ultimate masters, forcing the use of the body, and the kingdom of the night was broken, the body is already plagued with holes. At this moment, after fighting, the body was suddenly the tearing pain was extreme. Not bad. Come again. The prisoner Zhong smirked violently, and in his eyes captured the madness of war, and again slaughtered towards the sword unparalleled. Fuck. Countless black chains, at a faster speed, slammed into the sword Wushuang. Jian Wushuang's face sank, and Wu Wei's Excalibur was quickly cut by him. Every time he cut on the chain, Jian Wushuang felt a shock in his body every time this chain hit. It was powerful. Extremely hard to sink. Can't go on like this. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath, his expression dignified and said, "Open the sky." In that moment, Kaitian Jianmang turned into a roaring river and was cut off towards the prisoner dragon. Who kills with such soft power? The prisoner gave a grin, and actually reached out and grabbed Kaitian Jianmang in his hands. Feng Rui's sword exploded and kept slicing on the palm of prison dragon, but he did not even break the defense. Next moment, the prisoner dragon opened his mouth and actually bit the Kaitian Jianmang into his mouth. Click, click, click. Kaitian Jianmang was directly chewed by him and swallowed. How is that possible? Jian Wushuang's face turned wild, and there was an incredible color on his face. Blood sword, next, it's my turn. The prison dragon stretched out its barbed tongue, licked the corner of his mouth cruelly, and then smiled strangely, stretched out his hands to form a hug of heaven and earth. Dragon. God. Cannon. Bang. I saw countless divine powers condensing on his chest, forming a Mori blue light ball compressed to the extreme. The horror of this forest bluish sphere was extremely extreme, and the turbulent divine power spread, and even the void cracked. Next moment, the prisoner's chest was violently slammed. This Mori blue light ball suddenly hit the sword unparalleled like a missile. At the moment when this Mori blue light ball appeared, traversed the tracks in the void, turning countless voids into powder. Jian Wushuang's pupils shrank, his expression was dignified to the extreme. Regardless of the severe pain from the body, he bit his teeth and drank, cut the star. Chapter 4277. The first is more. The silver sword rainbow reappears in the world, like the water of the sky, and like the dawning thunder, with endless power, chopped off towards the prison dragon. Look at it, the blood sword is relying on this sword to kill the descendants of the Dark Lord. Who can stop such a sword? The style of this sword is really like the sword Ling Shi. Countless people marvel. And Jian Xiu's eyes were burning, his face was full of fascination, and he sighed, "Our generation of Xiu, it should be like this." However, only Jian Wushuang knows that now his whole body is full of divine power, and his body is full of scars. If this sword has star power, it is worthy of luck. Today, I'm afraid there will be difficulties. Jian Wushuang shook his head with a bitter smile. Chou Xing and Mori blue light ball collided fiercely. A terrifying explosion came, and then, I saw the silver sword rainbow began to collapse and shatter, and finally disappeared completely. And the nascent blue light ball, just after the light was slightly dim, then hit the sword Muzu again. Puff! A muffled noise came, and he did not wait for Jian Wushuang to react at all. The chest of Jian Wushuang's body was directly penetrated by the Sen Langguang ball, leaving a huge void. Jian Wushuang's face turned pale to the extreme, but it was crumbling and almost fell from the air. His body has been hit harder than ever. The audience instantly turned into a dead silence. Everyone stared at the scene blankly, forgetting to speak for a moment. The last second also carried one enemy killing the 4 invincible swordsmen who dominated the mighty sword. In the next second, he was defeated by this strange man who did not know where to come from. Immediately, they reacted excitedly and glared at the prison dragon. Despicable. Shoot while the blood sword is weakest. Let's kill someone while they are sick. That's a good way. Shameless. A sound of righteous indignation and sarcasm came, and the prisoner dragon shrugged his shoulders indifferently, then spread his hands, glanced at Jian Wushuang obliquely, scornfully. Weak, blood sword, you are too weak. After all, the prisoner laughed wildly, then shook his head and said to himself, I don't know what the guy in the iceberg thinks. Is such a garbage worthy of me? Jian Wushuang heard his face expressionless, but his eyes grew colder. He could feel that the power of his body was not enough to repair the scars on the body. Stop talking. Well, it's boring. The prisoner spread his hands, then flashed in shape, and appeared before the sword without double sides. So fast. Jian Wushuang's pupils shrunk, and he raised his arm arduously, trying to slash Wu weapon sword to resist. However, the prisoner's dragon had been thrown out fiercely, like a 9-section giant whip, and the fierce side kicked on the sword wasteless waste. Trash, you should have a trash attitude. This foot was thrown on Jian Wushuang, and the whole person of Jian Wushuang was directly dropped from the top of Jiuzhong Cloud, and he was severely smashed into a mountain rock, and a humanoid giant pit was smashed. Why, it's just an ant that can be crushed to death by hand. Prison Dragon poked his mouth, then slowly descended, and flew towards Jian Wushuang. Deep in the rocks, Jian Wushuang lay on the ground, panting like a drowning man. Pain. Intense pain. Every bone in his body, every inch of skin, every vein, seemed to be cracked, causing pain in the heart. The prisoner's foot not only destroyed all the divine power and the body he managed to recover, but also put him into a precarious position. I can fight. Jian Wushuang clenched his teeth. Although his whole body was hurting as if it were about to fall apart, the coldness and perseverance in his eyes did not decrease by half. The palm of the sword trembled and held the hilt of the sword of Wu Weeping Sword. A trembling support stood up. The prisoner's voice was somber and deep, and it resounded outside the rock. Oh, by the way, Blood Sword, I also prepared a gift for you. You should like it when you come call out. A turquoise arm shot violently from the outside of the mountain rock, then grabbed Jian Wushu's neck, pulled it back fiercely, and immediately pulled the sword out. The prisoner held his sword Wushuang's neck with 5 fingers and lifted the sword Wushuang's neck. He smiled and said, Blood Sword, when I pass the 10th city, a little guy said that he is yours, and if I dare to come you're going to die. It's ugly. Guess who is that person? Jian Wushuang heard the words, his face suddenly changed. The next moment, he saw the prisoner dragon flipping his right hand, dragging a black sandalwood box on his palm. The black sandalwood box slowly stretched out, a complexion with an iron complexion and eyes with wide eyes, appearing in front of the sword without double side. How Ember! Master Blood Sword! 2 sounds sounded at the same time. How Emperor glanced up and down Jian Wushuang, then turned his head, looked at Prison Dragon sternly, and roared angrily, What do you monster do to Lord Bloodsword? What did you do? Are you questioning me? Prison Dragon chuckled and continued to say, You are optimistic you, the Bloodsword Lord who is invincible in your heart, is in front of this seat how to ask for mercy. Huh. A violent divine power suddenly surged in the hands of the prisoner dragon, and then saw Jian Wushuang's legs explode. He licked the corner of the bloodthirsty mouth, and Pai Xiaoro did not smile. Bloodsword, your game is over. I will start your body from the feet, then to the skull, crushing inch by inch. Ha ha ha, despair, beg for mercy, growl. Jian Wushuang didn't say a word, looked at him coldly, his body began to explode, and then dissipated. Even so, Jian Wushuang's expression did not change half. Master Blood Sword. Seeing this, how Ember dominated the heart-shattering roar and burst into tears. Blood Sword. The leader of the distant mountain shook his face, and suddenly wanted to sprint over. However, he hadn't waited for him to take 2 steps. I saw the cold wind leader's body flashing, and he was standing in front of the shaking mountain leader, reaching out to stop him, and coldly yelled, Shake the mountain, recognize your own strength, you rush forward now, not only to help you can't kill Bloodsword, you will only bury your life. Shocking the mountain clenched his fists, his teeth clattered, squeezing out a sentence from his teeth. The cold wind, the Bloodsword is so good that we are in the same camp. Do we just watch him like this? Han Feng heard his face eased a bit, and sighed softly, Weak meat and strong food, strength is respect, the world is like this, and I can't stop it. He shook the commander of the mountain and gasped heavily, panting, and finally roared, and turned away, and could not bear to see the scene of Jian Wushuang being killed by the prisoner dragon. Chapter 4278. Second more. Master Blood Sword. How Emperor dominated Jian Wushuang with trembling eyes, his eyes were full of self-blame and guilt. If you are stronger and can share a little for the Bloodsword Master, will the Bloodsword Master not be the end? If he hadn't let it go at all, would this weirdo have let go of Bloodsword Master? How Emperor dominated the click of his teeth, and for the first time hated his humble strength. When Jian Wushuang heard the call, a pale smile was forced out of his pale face, and he smiled at the master of How Ember and said, It's not about you. After that, Jian Wu turned his eyes to Prison Dragon and said coldly, Tell me, who are you? I. Prison Dragon held sword Wushuang in one hand, heard the words and thought for a while, and then smiled and said without a smile, "Well, you are going to die anyway, then I will tell you, my, virtual temple, prison dragon. Well, Bloodsword, go to death with peace of mind." The prisoner gave a smirk, and countless divine power burst out between his 5 fingers. Infinite gravity. Suddenly, the power of the heavens and the earth were all mobilized, squeezing toward the sword unparalleled. Under the weight of this heaven and earth, the sword deity's body exploded 1 inch by 1 inch. Finally, in a loud noise, the sword deity double body completely collapsed, turned into countless divine power, and dissipated in the air. In an instant, the audience turned into a dead silence. Died. Countless people watched this scene blankly, shaking their hearts for a while. Even the sword Wushuang, who dominated the 4 invincible swords, was so dead. Everyone looked at each other face to face, all like falling ice cellar, cold all over the body. The leader of Shaking the Mountain is a clenched fist, and his nails sink into the flesh. Of all the people, only How Ember dominated, his face stunned, and he seemed to have found something, flashing a thoughtful look. Ha 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 ha, from today onwards, there will only be one voice heard throughout the ancient starry sky, and that is the voice of my prisoner dragon. In the 16th city sky, there was a loud laugh of prisoner dragons. He stepped in the void, his eyes narrowed, and he was full of evil spirits and domineering. Everyone looked up at Prison Dragon, inexplicably trembling. Years passed, 10 years passed in the blink of an eye. Jian Wushuang slashed the 4 invincible masters on the Shinkong ancient road, took down 5 sealed monuments, and then was killed by the prisoner dragon, and gradually spread out from the Shinkong ancient road. In a short time, the entire universe shook forever. With the 5th level dominance as the master, the 4 invincible dominators were beheaded. These deeds are enough to shine through the ages and shock the times. The name of the Bloodsword is the first time that the universe is truly famous. There are even more people who call the sword unparalleled, and become the first day of the universe. However, with the fall of Jian Wushuang, more people sighed. If the Bloodsword is immortal, it will have an impact on the Supreme. It's a pity that I have waited for so long for the universe to come out of such a demon proud. Whether or not the Bloodsword falls, he is enough to record entering the annals of history. Yes, there should be a place for Bloodsword in the list of eternal heavens. Countless people lamented. And with the news of Jian Wushuang falling, the the shrine of life shook. The temple of life, inside the Supreme Temple. Bloodwave Supreme was sitting on a big chair, his face was gloomy to the extreme. He had just gone to investigate, and the lamp of life left by Jian Wushuang had gone out. With a palm of his hand, he smashed the armrest of the large chair directly, with a gloomy expression. Check this seat. This seat must know, what is the identity of the prisoner dragon who killed the sword unparalleled? Yes. Several people in black knelt at the foot of Supreme Bloodwave. When he heard the words, his heart trembled immediately. He knew that the Supreme Bloodwave was really angry, and his congratulations should be immediately followed by a step and disappeared into the Supreme Temple. After doing all this, the frost on Bloodwave Supreme's face still hasn't been reduced by a small amount, and the murderous flash in his eyes. The giant axe sat next to him with the same ugly expression. Jian Wushuang can be said to carry the hope and optimism of the two of them. They are the people who will be on an equal footing with them in the future, and even command the people of the Temple of Life. Hearing the words of Supreme Bloodwave, this time Great Axe Supreme is not refuting anything. Although he is not good at words, it does not mean that he has less love for sword unparalleled. As long as they are fighting frankly, they allow Jian Wushuang to defeat or even die on the ancient road in the sky. This is nothing, but they will never allow anyone to sneak in on Jian Wushuang while they are in danger. Once this seat is known, who is behind the prisoner dragon, then no matter who it is, I have to pay him. The Bloodwave Supreme Mori opened his mouth, and his eyes were icy and cold. Extreme anger, thousands of corpses. He wants to let the people behind the prison dragon know the price of annoying a Supreme. The Supreme Axe is raising his head, and there is a icy killing in his eyes. Their shrine of life has been dormant for dozens of times. It seems that it is time to tell everyone in the world. All disciples of Life Shrine should not be disgrace. The Taishu Temple, which has no light all year round, is shrouded in shadow. Under a black minaret, the lord of the Ice Palace, who has been promoted to be the contemporary emperor of the Taishu Temple, stands quietly in front of the window, standing with his hands on his face, neither happy nor sad on his face, and no emotions can be seen. Outside the window, countless lightnings intertwined, countless thunders blew, and the white light shone on the face of the owner of Bingyu Hall holding a copy incoming news. The content of the newsletter is simple. After the blood sword slashed the 4 invincible masters, it was subsequently killed by the prison dragon. Shu Jian Wushuang is dead. Your vengeance is a reward, so rest in peace. The lord of the ice hall murmured to himself, then turned around and walked towards the dark place of the black minaret. The text message in his hand fell, and then a blaze of fire spontaneously ignited and burned it. At the same time, deep in the extreme starry sky ancient road, King Jojia sat on a mountain with his eyes closed. His white hair was slightly shaken by the wind, and his white clothes were dyed red by the blood of the supreme god. The next moment, he slowly opened his eyes and looked up at the sky. The ancient and indifferent eyes seemed to cross the starry sky and look into the unknown distance. In his hand, he holds a recent cosmic newsletter. Died. He looked down at the newsletter in his hand, and a look of disdain flashed in his eyes, and a divine power poured out in his hand, directly squeezing the newsletter into cosmic powder and dispersed with the wind. Hes the one who won this seat, how could he die there? He took a deep breath and shook his head disdainfully. He is still waiting for Jian Wushuang to break through the Supreme and fight with him, and he is still looking forward to the two meeting again at the cosmic race. He would never allow it. Swordless died. Between heaven and earth, there was a return to silence. After a long time, a faint murmur came again. Jian Wushuang, if you are really dead, then the prisoner will kill you, and I will slaughter his entire family for you. The sound is very light. But it's cold. Chapter 4279. The first is more. That day, after the news of Jian Wushuang's death came out, the major forces in the depths of the universe have heard news. In the solar star field, it was even said that Emperor Jinwu was happy to laugh extremely. Ha ha ha, blood sword, one newspaper at a time, you kill me, naturally someone will kill you. Just hateful, this emperor cannot take off your skull with your own hand. I saw Emperor Jinwu's body repaired from the sun, his body was wrapped in flames, and Huang Huang was like of heaven. His handsome face was full of resentment and pleasure. Just in the whole universe, when the sword died without twins, the wind and the storm surged. There is a trace of divine power in the supreme starry ancient road, but it is wandering aimlessly. This divine power is truly a sword unparalleled. That day in 16 City, Jian Wushuang's divine power was nearly exhausted, and the deity was pinched by the prisoner dragon. If it were anyone else, I was afraid that it would really die. Unfortunately, Jian Wushuang is the perfect chaotic life. At that critical juncture, Jian Wushuang made an instant decision, and finally used the second awakening supernatural power to decompose the power. Decomposition of the divine power was not a terrible killing move, but it was the sword with no hands underneath, and the last gold medal for death. It can decompose sword Wushuang into the most primitive divine power particles and attach to anything. As long as there is a trace of divine power, Jian Wushuang will not die, but the life lamp in the Palace of Life is directly broken. Jian Wushuang finally used this talented supernatural power to absorb the Tai Luo divine sword and Chenkuan ring into the divine power. Finally, under the explosion, numerous divine powers were scattered, and a trace of it was blasted away towards the distance. However, for some reason, 100 years have passed, and Jian Wushuang did not wake up, but was turbulent and constantly wandering in the void. As time goes by, he constantly floats in the void, like a rootless duckweed, rolling along with the tide, and like a lost child, unable to find the direction of home. No one found him, and Jian Wushuang floated in the 16th city for 100 years. He followed the wind, across countless mountains and rivers, across many battlefields, and witnessed one kill after another. He is like one of the most lonely passers in the world, seeing the ebb and flow, seeing the rise and fall of life and death. Finally, he left the 16th city floating. In the midst of it, there seemed to be something guiding him, drifting towards a place. 15th city. 14th city. 13th city. 500 years later, Jian Wushuang still hasn't awoke. He floats up and down in the void, and floats across several cities. He didn't know where he was going, but just followed the instructions in the deep and drifted farther away. At last, he returned to the 10th city. After arriving in the 10th city, the guidance became stronger. He floated and came to the refining tower again. Hundreds of years have passed, and the refining tower has not changed. Many ultimate dominators surround the refining tower, and their faces are full of eagerness, hoping that they can make a good ranking in the refining tower. But at this moment, no one noticed that a divine power was passing by them, and then slammed into the pagoda of refining God. This time re-entering the tower of refined gods, perhaps because Jian Wushuang once broke through the tower and was not blocked, he went straight through the first 7 floors to the 8th floor. Refining God Tower, 8th floor. This is also the last layer of Jian Wushuang's breakthrough. Here, he met a sword warrior exactly the same as him, perfectly copying all his sword powers. In the end, the sword warrior used all his powers to kill him. And when he came to the 9th floor, he had no time to look at the future, and felt that a great force came out and expelled him directly. Rumble. I saw the empty space on the 8th floor of the refining God Tower. The space continued to tear, and a dark vortex black hole emerged. An invisible force, taken from a black hole, seemed to be calling Jian Wushuang into it. Next moment, the magical power of the sword warriors turned straight into 10th city. The owner of the 10th city, the starry sky ancient road, guards the ambassador of the ambassador blue in a fortress. A slender figure wearing a blue suit, face covered with a veil, was sitting quietly on a futon cross-legged. Suddenly, the image sensed something, and long eyelashes jumped. Immediately, a pair of beautiful eyes opened slowly, flashing a fascination. Sure enough, back there was a chuckle under Lord Lan's veil, and then she stood up and walked towards the outside of the room. Alas! The door of the compartment opened automatically, and a respectful cry came out. "Ill wait, welcome to Lord Lan. Ill wait, welcome to Lord Lan." Blue Lord nodded slightly when he heard the words, and said lightly, "Come here, arrange all the news in the recent ancient sky and then give it to this seat." Yes. Many of the armor guards dispersed. Lord Lan stood with his hands in his hands, and his eyes flashed a moment of thought, and then he flew into the fortress and fled towards the refining tower. The 9th floor of the refining God Tower, after a faint twist of the magic power transformed by the sword unparalleled, it became the sword unparalleled. At this moment, Jian Wushuang, who had fallen into consciousness, suddenly woke up. "Me, swordsman." Jian Wushuang suddenly opened his eyes, and there was a sharpness in his eyes. Immediately, he looked around, his expression suddenly shocked. "Here is." Jian Wushuang's pupils contracted, and there was an incredible color on his face. I saw that there was a chaotic void around it, and the sky and the earth were all dark and dim, like the beginning of chaos, the splitting of yin and yang, and when the universe was born, innumerable channels of the most primitive rule of origin force swept through the air. Storms and thunderstorms, the sky of the earth, kendo, kendo. The rules here are endless, and they are the most pure and ancient rule powers in the world, born at the beginning of the universe. These most primitive and pure rule powers, like Wang Yong, are so rich that they enclose swordsmanship in them. It's just a pity that these original forces can be seen and felt, but they seem to be blocked by a force, and the sword can't absorb the slightest. What happened? Jian Wu's eyes flashed his thoughts and looked towards the void. I saw that in the void, countless Tao rules of origin condensed into 2 words. Viewing the mind. Viewing mind. Jian Wushuang's brow lifted, and Ningxian looked towards these 2 words. His eyes gradually became contemplative. Is that so? Jian Wushuang thought to himself thoughtfully, then sat down cross-legged and began to quietly realize. The biggest creation in a refining tower begins. Chapter 4280. Second more. The 9th floor of the refining God Tower is full of original rules. The concentration of regular breath here far exceeds that of any place in the ancient road of Shinkong. even the Wudao River in the Temple of Life cannot be compared with it. Jian Wushuang sat quietly sitting cross-legged, staring at the word viewing heart, his eyes flashing with thought. If I guess correctly, the test of the 9th floor should be to comprehend the word viewing heart. Jian Wushuang murmured to himself and began to carefully review each level of the God of Purification Tower he had crossed. He remembered that the first floor of the Refining God Tower was the Yuan Eater. When slaughtering the Yuan Eater, he used the Wu Weeping Sword to crush it. The second layer is the Bandage Swordsman. By this time, although Sword Wushuang is still the most common sword skill, the magic power and the origin of Kendo are far higher than the first layer. Subsequently, the Headless Leader on the 3rd layer, the Swordsman on the 4th layer, the Ancient Swordsman on the 5th layer, and the Feihong on the 6th layer will. Many, waiting to defeat Feihong Xinjiang, in addition to those few Killer's Whole cards, other magical powers he has exhausted all effort. Every time he broke through the level, Jian Wushuang felt that he had used the aftermath of magical powers and some divine powers, which were absorbed by the void in the refining tower. Up to the 7th floor, a sword warrior like him appeared. This simulation body can accurately use every magical power he used in the first few layers. Sword Unparalleled used all-around skills, and finally used the sword Yongyi before defeating it. Then comes the 8th floor. There is no longer any opponent on the 8th floor, but a sword stone. There was a sword mark on that sword stone, and I do know who left it. Even with the sword talent of Jian Wushuang, who was amazing, it took nearly a minute to realize the true meaning of it. In the end, Jian Wushuang came to the 9th floor, and before seeing anything, he felt dark and was expelled by a huge force, as if the heaven and earth could not fit him, and was out of step with him. Until this time, Jian Wushuang turned into the most original divine power, only an ignorant, entered the 9th floor of the Tower of Refining Gods that no one has ever set foot on. Perhaps from the beginning, this Tower of Refining Gods was not a place for trials, but a gift from Shinkong Ancient Road. The so-called trials were just to decide the distribution of different gifts according to the different ways of each person. Jian's eyes blinked, and he bowed his head and said to himself, "It's just a gift. Only those who climbed to the top of the tower to refine the tower are eligible to receive it." So, that said. Jian Wushuang's eyes narrowed, his gaze was directed at the word Guanxin, and Shen said, "As long as I understand the word Guanxin, I can devour all the rules of origin here, and once I devour it, the rules of origin are enough to push me to the ultimate level, even higher." Thinking of this, Jian Wushuang took a deep breath and began to meditate silently. Watch the heart. Of these two words, if you can't guess badly, then the focus should be on the word heart. Heart, what is it? Jian Wushuang slowly closed his eyes. The heart should refer to the original heart, the deepest one in the heart, the Tao that was advocated at the beginning. Gradually, Jian Wushuang's thoughts were empty, as if returning to the ancient world, back to the Qianzong dynasty, back to Zhenhu House, Bashui County, Tianlihang Province. There, it was where Kendo began in his life. There, it was the first time he clenched the hilt of his sword when he was young. That was his initial intention when practicing sword. Jian Wushuang began to look for it, the original heart that had long been forgotten by himself and did not know where it was going. Time passed, and in the blink of an eye, thousands of years passed. Jian Wushuang is still immersed in the search for the initial heart, and is caught in the deepest level of understanding, and the outside world has changed a lot. The biggest change in the Shinkong Ancient Road is that the prisoner dragon continuously challenged the 8 giants, winning 8 battles and winning 8. After reaching the Shinkong Ancient Road, he was the first person in 8 cities and crowned the new king. Shinkong Ancient Road, the 18th city, is also the last city of Shinkong Ancient Road. A grand ceremony for the crowning of a new king is beginning. The prison dragon sits on a throne. Except for the Lord Blue, the other 8 giants are sitting under him, some with flattering expressions, some with expressionless faces, and others with overcast faces. Sunny. The Overlord is also in it, but at this moment, there is still a bit of overbearing majesty on his face, and the yin is extremely extreme, and he keeps his head down and says nothing. Last time, the two played against each other in Overlord Shrine and ended with his defeat. Under the strange power of the prisoner dragon, His indestructible domineering body that repressed the heavens was actually suppressed and died, and he was not the opponent of the prisoner dragon at all. In the end, I had to inform Jian Wushuang's whereabouts, and after the prisoner dragon destroyed his overlord shrine, he left with a big wave. You guys, don't hide it, this time it is difficult for everyone to hold the new king's coronation ceremony, otherwise, with this modest and low-key personality, where would you like this extravagance? The prison dragon tilted his head, supported the throne with his right elbow, supported his chin on the back of his hand, and said with a smile. The expressionless giants such as Bawang, the chief of the Molu tribe, and the Joshing Shengzi heard the words, all of which were drawn from the corner of their mouths. They have seen it, how shameless this prisoner is. But they were silent and did not say anything. They knew that the prison dragon suddenly summoned them up, naturally not for the purpose of witnessing his ascension to the throne. So simple, there must be some plans. The young emperor of the great divine kingdom, the young prince who greatly enshrines the kingdom of God, the blood of the blood temple, and the demon lord of the red sun, all have a coquettish face, and when they heard it, they laughed quickly. Naturally, the strong ones live here, and the prisoner dragon is superior in strength, so he should have sat on this throne. These people announced that they had taken refuge in prison dragons long after they lost the 8 giants in a row. Upon hearing this, Prison Dragon laughed and said, 4 of you are still sensible. After finishing speaking, Prison Dragon turned his eyes and looked at the Overlord and others, and smiled vaguely. You guys, are you ready for the new king this time? The tyrants, Prince Molu, and Joshing Shengzi all heard. Their eyes narrowed. They knew that the prisoner dragon was trying to see the poor, and he was archaic. It is a superb magic medicine, which is enough to increase the strength of magic power by 30%. Before he finished speaking, I saw the prisoner's head slowly raised his head, his face interrupted coldly. Superb magic medicine? Are you fooling with this seat, and then taking the garbage? Joshing Shengzi heard the words, his face suddenly felt ugly, forcibly depressed his heart and asked, Dare to ask Master Prisoner, what do you want? Prison Dragon smiled. He glanced at the faces of the 3 sons of Joshing Shengzi, Bawang, and Ma Luo, and licked the corners of his mouth cruelly. This seat wants all the monuments on you. Chapter 4281. The first is more. What? Joshing Shengzi, Overlord, and others heard that their faces changed suddenly. Sealing the stele is their sole purpose of coming to Shinkong Ancient Road. To seal the stele, they paid too much. Now handing over the function tablet is not the same as the operation of the Ancient Road in Shinkong over the years. This prison dragon has such a big appetite. Master Prisoner Dragon, forgive me for not being able to surrender the function monument. Joshing Shengzi pressed down the anger in his heart and arched back. Oh. Then you just don't give this face to this seat. Prison Dragon twisted his neck and made a kakaka sound. The great prince and young emperor who stood on his sides suddenly took a cold light in his eyes. I felt a blast of coldness and rushed at them. The Joshing Shengzi, Overlord, and the chief of the Demon Lord Luo changed their faces, and the most irritable Demon Lord of the Demon Lord, when they shot the case in front of them, stared at the prisoner with a dead eye, and said, Prisoner, you don't go too far, it's up. The 2 Joshing Shengzi and the Overlord also got up and stood up, standing behind the patriarch of Maruo Shao, exuding their own coercion. When the prisoner saw this, the smile on his face gradually converged, and he said indifferently, How about too much? But not too much. The words fell, Prison Dragon shot violently, a chain lazing from his back, and flung it towards the neck of the chief of the Luo family. Good job. The Devil Luo tribe burst into a drink, and the sturdy tree-like arms blasted out instantly, carrying the horrific force and banging towards this chain. The Demons Luo family only repaired magical powers, born with divine power, and their horror was extremely extreme. I saw this punch blow out, and the smashing void suddenly shook. This fist is enough to capsize the mountains and the sea, and the earth split. I saw the clash of the two, and gave out a huge bang, and the horrible fist force broke the chain of chains. The prisoner licked the corner of his mouth and made a hissing sound. After waiting for the fist of the Mo Luo tribe to exhaust his strength, hundreds of chains had floated behind him and blasted at him again. Just when the two were about to start a world-fighting war, The 9-star prince immediately said, "Moro, don't be reckless. I will not retreat before being a prisoner of dragons." Looking at the hundreds of chains that came crashing, Moro's face was cloudy for a while, and he knew that the prison dragon had not yet really shot. He groaned and yelled again, using the power of Maruo to blast these chains again. After shattering, he stepped harder and swept away. The king of overlords and Zhu Xingshengzi were equally ashamed, each performed a secret technique and left in an instant. Watching the disappearance of the three people, the big prince and the blood sun standing on both sides of the prison dragon were about to chase them, and then saw the prison dragon waving his hand, and said lazily, "Let them go. Anyway, now they are far from the universe, there will be tens of thousands of years for the Grand Clan event. If they all die, who will bring fun to this seat?" "Yes." The granddaughter of the grandma and others laughed. The prisoner dragon looked up and looked at the overlord and other people who had turned into small black spots in the sky, and there was a hint of playfulness in his eyes. At the same time, outside the ancient sky and the sky, because of the death of Jian Wushuang, the whole universe has been surging. Life Shrine, Supreme Shrine. The Supreme Master Xiebua and the Great Axe sat in the main seat, and several men in black who were in charge of inquiring about the news of the prisoner dragon had returned, kneeling respectfully at the feet of the two. "Return to the Supreme Bloodwave Supreme, the Great Axe Supreme, I have found the news about the prisoner dragon." "Heh. Let's talk in detail." The Bloodwave Supreme and the Great Axe looked at each other, and there was a cold flash in his eyes, and he said coldly, "Yes." These men in black bowed their heads and narrated quickly. After a scent of incense, a few people in black turned into black shadows, and then left the Supreme Temple. In the Supreme Shrine, it became a quiet place, leaving only the Bloodwave Supreme fingertips hitting the handrails, and the sound of tuck-tuck-tuck was made. Bloodwave, if the prison dragon is really like the Shadow Guard said, it was the dragon who had been stripped of the Supreme Divine Realm because of the failure to occupy the position in the dragon, then it will be a bit difficult. You also do know, dragon according to the rules of the Dragon Clan, the Dragon Clan can only be killed by the Dragon Clan, otherwise the person created such a sin in the Taishu Temple, and the Emperor of the Taishu Temple could not just suppress him, but not kill him. Dead. Great Axe frowned, and said. Bloodwave Supreme heard no expression on his face, and said indifferently, "What about the dragons?" "He has been expelled because he put down his taboos on the dragons. He has not belonged to the dragons long ago. Now he is just a funeral dog." After a long pause, Bloodwave Supreme continued, "Furthermore, the Shinkong Ancient Road incident was not planned by the dragons, and the owner had a debt and a debtor. What this one is looking for is not a dragon, but it is just a temple." After hearing the words and thinking for a long time, Supreme Master Axe passed a moment of determination in his eyes, and laughed heartily. "Well, this seat is for the sword unparalleled, why not go crazy last time? What he said is difficult, not impossible. Hit him with a huge axe, never a person who is afraid." Zun Shuebua Supreme laughed, and for years, he and this old friend have not fought side by side. "I'm afraid this time, the two will fight again." "Okay, then I'll go to the Taishu Temple now and discuss justice for Wushuang." Bloodwave Supreme laughed loudly, stood up, and left the Temple of Life. The giant Axe's eyes narrowed, and a wave of killing began to condense, and he also stood up. Just as the two were about to step out of the Temple of Life, a disciple of the Temple of Life came quickly. "Two adults, please stay away, and Supreme Lord has something to let the younger bring them to two." Blood Supreme and Axe Supreme frowned and heard that Supreme had to stop them. "What's the matter?" Bloodwave Supreme said lightly. The Life Shrine disciple quickly said, "Two adults," Supreme Gav said, "You do NT stop you from leaving the Life Shrine this time, but you do NT just ask what you want to do, but you must not use the banner of Life Shrine. What you do is all your personal inclinations and has nothing to do with the Temple of Life." Bloodwave Supreme and Giant Axe Supreme heard the words and could not help but smile at each other. What does it mean? They naturally understand. It is good. The two nodded their heads. Blood Supreme seemed to remember again, and instructed, "Yes, the thing about Jian Wushuang's death is still the same as before, he must not be revealed to his acolyte. News, do you understand?" "Yes." The disciple of the Shrine of Life shook his hands and replied. Bloodwave Supreme and Great Axe Supreme no longer hesitate, looking up to the sky, under the body, has appeared thousands of miles away. The Temple of Life, the temple where the Supreme Lord is located. The Supreme Cover sat on a yin-yang futon cross-legged, surrounded by several exquisite incense burners, a smoky smoke of innocence, rising from the incense burner, spreading out into the mist. "Little guy, there is only so much I can do for you." There was a rustling voice coming out of his mouth. Chapter 4282. Second more. The years continue to flow, and the 5,000-year period will soon elapse. With the Supreme and the giant axe killing the Taishu Temple, the entire universe was full of smoke for a while. In Shinkong Ancient Road, the 10th city, the 9th floor of the refining tower, Jian Wushuang sat cross-legged in the chaotic void, his eyes closed slightly, his brows frowned. At this moment, he didn't know where he was now or how long it had passed. He only knew that he had fallen into the long river of years, and a reflection of hundreds of thousands of years of life began. He was searching in the long river of these years, and he had long lost his original heart. Why do you practice yourself? Why practice sword? Jian Wushuang wanted Zheng Jin to tell him an answer. In the years, he saw his young sword battle, saw his spirit, saw his own Jedi's counterattack, and saw himself going through ups and downs. Until a long time passed, Jian Wushuang opened his eyes suddenly, like a dragon waking up in deep sleep, like a lightning flash across the night. Jian's eyes shot 3 inches of mansions violently. Chushin, he found it. His original intention was reverse. Even facing the endless darkness, you can split it with a sword and see the fearlessness of the light again. Even if the sky wants to press him, he will split the sky, and even if the ground is to stop him, he will break the ground and treat him as death. Even if deep in the swamp, you must go forward with a heavy load, clenching your teeth, and never give up. This is his sword unparalleled inverse. Just this inverse, with the continuous improvement of Jian Wushuang's strength, the constant fame of the world. It made Jian Wushuang missing. However, it has never been far away, just stored in the place where Jian Wushuang forgot, and quietly waiting for the arrival of Jian Wushuang. Now, Jian Wushuang finally found it back. "Sorry to keep you waiting," Jian Wushuang murmured to himself, then looked up at the word Guanxin. The word Guanxin is broken. Suddenly, the numerous original rules on the 9th floor, like the rising tide, surged toward the endless waves of swords. Under the strong original rules, Jian Wushuang's broken body, fast recovery, exhausted divine power, also became full at a very fast speed. Jian Wushuang quietly absorbed these most primitive rules of breath, and began to impact towards the ultimate dominating realm. He believes that once he breaks through to the ultimate dominating realm and exits the customs again, he will be shocked. As Jian Wushuang began to impact the ultimate realm, in the universe, a great battle between the Supremes burst out. The Supreme of Bloodwave and the Great Axe of the two entered the Taishu Temple directly. Extreme power, no one can stop it. What's more, the Supreme of the Bloodwave and the Supreme of the Great Axe are the top extremes in the universe. When the two shot, they swept the invincible, and flattened the two virtual star field in general. In addition to the Ice Temple Supreme, and the main halls of the leading temples in the Supreme Star Road, the other 4 halls the Lord shot everything, strangling the Bloodwave Supreme and the Great Axe Supreme. This battle was so earth-shattering that countless stars and galaxies were smashed and countless starfields were ground. The starry sky around the entire Taishu starfield was even more fragmented. I do not know how many disciples in the Temple of the Xian were tragically dead in the blood. Extreme Axe Hand. This battle lasted for several years and ended with the defeat of the 4 main halls. When this news came out, the entire universe was horrified and stunned. At this time, everyone came to realize that they were silent for dozens of Chaos-era life shrines. Once they were angry, what a horror. At this moment, the gate of the Temple of Life. The Bloodwave Supreme was expressionless, his clothes were stained with Supreme God blood, his hair was flying slightly, and countless disciples of the Taishu Temple were watching from afar, all shivering. The Supreme Axe is transformed into a giant and axe-bearing giant, like an ancient who opened up the world, a horrifying atmosphere that can shake 9 heavens and 10 places, crush the eternal world, and radiate from his body. The masters of the 4 halls suffered injuries and stayed outside the Taishu temple. Their faces were ugly. Bloodwave, giant axe, in order to make a sword unparalleled, do you too want to start a war between Taishu temple and Life temple? A silver-haired boy strode from the temple of Taishu with a pale complexion and cold eyes in his eyes enough to freeze the stars. It is Bingyu Supreme. Bingyu, when you sent a prisoner dragon to kill my temple disciple sword unparalleled, did you ever think of waging war? Bloodwave Supreme saw Bingyu Supreme coming out, his face was not moved, and his indifferent hand was indifferent. Said. Bingyu Supreme heard a sneer, and replied, this seat is nothing but the way of treating its own. In the ruins of Tai Luo, Jian Wushuang can kill his disciples. Now, this seat can naturally send someone to kill him. Is this the only sword in the world that kills this person, and the reason why this person cannot kill him? It is ridiculous. Bloodwave Supreme squinted his eyes, looked at him lightly, and frowned. What's the matter? You. Bingyu Supreme replied with an instant anti-smiling smile. Blood, don't bully people too much. Bloodwave Supreme heard the words, and then faintly replied, this seat, I'm just lying to you today, what? Bingyu Supreme heard the words and immediately laughed. What a bully me. With a smile, he suddenly looked down at Bloodwave Extreme, his eyes cold to the extreme. Bloodwave, it seems that there is only one battle. The voice fell down, a shocking horror breath erupted centered on Bingyu Supreme. This breath is so powerful that if he stretches out his hand, he can pinch the sky, and if he steps on it, he can break the universe. Extreme power, so scary. Okay, I heard that you are now the new emperor of the Taishu temple. I just want to see how strong your new emperor is. Bloodwave Supreme said faintly. Come on then. Bingyu Supreme gave a cold drink, and when he stepped on his right foot, he suddenly disappeared outside the Taishu shrine and swept towards a remote part of the universe. Bloodwave Supreme's expression was indifferent, and the same body flashed, and chased towards Bingyu Supreme. Both are top of the universe. Once they fight, they will blast all the surrounding stars, so they must find a remote place in the universe. Morocco Supreme, Ice God of Emperor. The faces of the other 4 main halls changed, and as soon as they wanted to catch up, they saw the giant axe step down, and the horrifying axe passed in front of them, with an indifferent expression. This seat is here, and no one must disturb them. Battle between them. Just when the Supreme of the Bloodwaves and the Great Axe killed the Taishu temple. A similarly eye-catching news came out from the Supreme Starry Road. The King of 9 Robbers killed the 2 deputy temple masters of the Taishu temple in the Supreme Starry Ancient Road. The deputy of the 7th hall is Bai Fu, the deputy of the 5th hall is Young. The entire universe is shocked again. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.